Okay, you're okay to start the meeting.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order for Wheels LAVTA here on September 13th at 4 o'clock. I wonder if we could take a roll call, please.
Director Bonanno.
Here.
Vice Chair Halbert.
Here.
Director Hernandez.
Here.
Director Josie.
Here.
Director Narum.
Here.
Chair Brown.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Terrific. All right. And we're up to meeting open to the public. This is a chance for someone from the public to speak on items currently not listed on our agenda, but having to do with transportation and Wheels responsibilities here in the Tri-Valley. Do we have anybody that would like to speak under open to the public today?
We did not receive any public comment via email, and I don't see any hands raised in the attendee list.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So we're on to the July Tri-Valley Accessible Advisory Committee minutes, and or if we have a speaker that would like to speak on this item.
Give me just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and move Herb over. Herb, can you unmute?
Yeah, I'm still doing the technical goodies. Here we are.
Great.
Yeah, we all love these things.
Hi, welcome,
Okay.
Herb. Welcome to our meeting today.
And Jennifer did give me a new upgrade of my funny paper that's on our wall. Okay, let me open my fancy toy to get my notes. Otherwise, so this is the 2 months ago one, or
July.
July's not. Thank you, Carla. Carla. I'm gonna get you two mixed up. I'm having fun with both of you guys this week. So I go into the July report. So we had. Let's see, where are we again? We had the officers' elections for 2022 or 21-22, and as expected, I did get reinstated as chair. Sean Costello is now the acting vice chair. He got reinstated this year for that. We went through the schedule for the meeting schedule. As of now, we did not have a September meeting because there was no issue, and that will be done when we have our next Wednesday in November. Let's see. Then we went over the reinstatement schedule. The staff gave us for fixed route being effective June, in the month of June, for regular services back to normal that were dirty word, I'm going to call it. So that's where we are with that. Paratransit day programs. So I had arranged an agenda to have staff work with the day program staff especially over at Regional Center, to program or start setting up the procedures of what their intentions are for reinstating the services for passengers because of safety issues and using the system again as programs are now starting to open up again. Let's see, PACO report. I just gave the basic report about what happened and the previous meeting, and I was now instated back as the independent watchdog committee representative for PACO. Esther is still the acting PACO rep, or for our department, or for our committee, I should say. And then we had the paratransit. We had service updates and questions for different issues that happened during the previous period of different activities. I did a trial run using the one seat program. I mean, I was right over to Lafayette, which was kind of nice. Warren had to set me up to arrange a run over there. And that was actually convenient. I want to hope I hope this program gets continued for that system of interconnections. That would be very nice. I'm working with Paco on that one. And let's see, we had not really any other questions. And that's basically the meeting we had. Anyone got any questions for me?
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Hastings? Don't see any hands raised, so that meant your report was thorough and complete.
Okay.
All right, thank you,
All
Herb.
right, I gotta jump off and go to another one. So I'll
Okay.
see you guys next time and keep in touch.
We absolutely know how that works. On to the next one. All right, we're on to our consent agenda.
Carla?
Yes.
Can I cut in for just a moment and bring it back, if possible, to public comment? I was wrong. There was one.
Oh, all right. That sounds great. So please open it up for public comment. We'll go back to agenda item 3.
How would you like to do this? Because the person emailed it. It was Stephen Dunbar. I could read it so that you all hear, or we could just put it as documented that he sent in public comment. Michael Conran?
If it's short, you could read it. If it's long, maybe you could just summarize the title so the board's aware of what the comments regard.
Sure. So he had 3 open comments that he wanted to say. He wanted to give a thank you to Mr. Tree, Mr. McCauley, and Mr. Massa for working to improve our bus transit system while simultaneously pushing forward with our important train project. And then it kind of went on from there. The second thing was advertising free fares. Looks like he's been using the free fare month to a good effect, but notice that the destination signs don't seem to be advertising that the fares are free. And again, he kind of went on and explained a few other things. The third topic was Lyft app combined public transit plus rideshare support release. It says he noticed that the Lyft app, which shows wheel buses, thanks to Mr. Tran's work, now also has the capability to integrate Lyft rides with public transit all within the app. And again, he goes on. I can send this out to all the board members so you can take a look, and I'll post this online.
And please send it to Mr. Tree as well.
Will do.
That'd be
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll close the public hearing now, since that looks to be the only speaker. We're on to the consent item. These are items normally routine in nature and passed by single vote, but I think we have some comments on a few of these items. Council member, board member Narum I'm going to ask you to comment on agenda item D, if you don't mind, and E as well. If not, I will comment on E.
Sure, I'm happy to comment on D. This was something that was initiated out of the Finance Committee as a way to have a long-term plan for the unfunded pension liability for LAVTA. And LAVTA is choosing to work through the CalPERS trust fund as opposed to going outside, which I think in this case, given the magnitude of the unfunded liability, makes more sense than to go out and try to get a and try to select a vendor and manage them. So my initial reaction was, I thought that we should go outside, but after you think about it and put it in perspective, I think this is actually the way to go. And I'm thrilled to see this moving forward. My only comment is that I think we need to have at a later date a policy on when we use the trust fund. And I know it's on me to, I had committed to get the Pleasanton's fund for, no, I'm sorry, Pleasanton's policy for that when we would withdraw from our fund. And I am guilty of not having done that yet, which I have on my to-do list.
Kathy,
But
not to interrupt you, but I got it from Tina
Oh.
the very next day within 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah,
she
so I've
did-
already got it ready for the next meeting.
Great. That's, the one outstanding thing that I think we need to do. And as far as the next one, my comment is that I think, and the chair would agree that at some point the Hacienda Business Park is a logical place for the SAV. And once it's the kinks are worked out, I would hope that we would move to quickly at least get one vehicle there, given the BART station, the nice wide streets, etc. It makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, nice slow streets. We did receive a letter. I think just a few of us received the letter. So just to let the entire board know from Mr. James Paxton saying that he supports the process for LAVTA, but he would like to be considered for the next phase of SAVs. And I'd even add wide, slow streets, since Dublin Boulevard's pace is a considerable issue. And then I do have a question on the, so Tamara, if you're still there on 5D, it's kind of deep into the packet, but it states that the asset strategy is going to be strategy 2, which is fine, and conservative, which is good. But the 10-year expected rate of return was only 4%. And that seemed a little bit low to me. I wonder if you could comment on that.
It seems a little low to me as well. Based on our actuals for our CERBIT funds, the CERBIT over the last 10 years has earned 9.8%. So I think they like to do their, from talking to Jay McDonald, they like to be very conservative in their projections because many cities, agencies, special districts kind of bank on it. And then they come back with, well, you said it would be, and it's not. And they don't want to have anyone working that way where, they're banking on a certain percent and it doesn't meet it. However, the strategy would be similar to what we do for our CERBIT, and the 10-year average, because we've been in it just over 10 years, ending June 30th, 2021 was 9.8%. So I expect it to actually come in higher, but the committee and I both felt that going the conservative route was the best way. We definitely don't want to lose any money.
Absolutely. And, I was afraid that you were going to say, well, my investor says there might be some trouble ahead in the stock market. So if they're just being conservative, that's great. Do I have any more comments on the consent calendar? I don't see any hands raised. So would somebody like to
Move
make a
approval,
motion?
Halbert.
I'll second it.
A motion made by Halbert, seconded by Narum. Could we have a roll call vote, please? Unless
Yes.
there's comments. All right, seeing none, please vote.
Director Bonanno,
Aye.
Vice Chair Halbert,
Aye.
Director Hernandez,
Aye.
Director Josie,
Aye.
Director Narum,
Aye.
Chair Brown.
Yes, aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, we're now speaking of which, let's talk about the zero emissions bus study update. Staff?
Good afternoon. My name is Tong Tran. I think most of you guys know me. I'm the Director of Operation and Innovation. And other than Director Bonanno, I believe all recognize the panelists in this group, because we initiated a zero emission bus study last May, I believe, due to a new California Air Resource Board requirement, which mandate that, I'm not sure mandate is the right word, so correct me if I'm wrong, Savannah, but requires all transit agencies to have a plan to convert their fleet to zero emission by 2040. Because of that, we initiated a study last May to look at the options are available out there between battery electric bus and fuel cell buses. We currently have all hybrid diesel buses. So I'm happy to report that the initial draft of the study is complete. I believe you have that in your staff report as an attachment. We didn't think it was fair for you to read a 100-page report over the weekend and provide a recommendation. So we're taking a two-phase approach or two-pronged approach. So today's meeting is to provide you with a brief overview of the study and then seek initial comment and feedback. And then we'll take the item back to the PNS committee later this month, hopefully for a more robust discussion. And there we'll ask for the committee's recommendation to choose which path we would like to go forward with for the zero emission bus rollout plan. That is the actual CARB requirement, is for us to have a ZIP rollout plan approved by the board. So we have Savannah Gupton from Center for Transportation and Environment, Nikki and Steve here today to provide you with the presentation. So with that, I'll pass it on to Savannah.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. It's good to see you all again. Thanks for the opportunity to come and update you on the progress. It's really exciting work. So bear with me while I get the PowerPoint in front of you and ask the inevitable question if you're seeing my presentation mode or my notes. All right. So I guys see my presentation. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Perfect.
Excellent. All right. So just a reminder, I think it's been a while since we all talked. And so just want to remember who we are, who you guys hired to come help y'all. So CTE stands for Center for Transportation and the Environment. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, but we really function as an engineering and planning firm. So that nonprofit status allows us to be beholden to you and the clean air mission and not to selling you a bus or other items. And so that's really dear to us to have that opportunity to operate in that space and really prove out our mission, which is listed below, rather than kind of, focus on other bottom lines. So we do have a $600+ million portfolio that includes smart deployments and transition plans. And we focus exclusively on zero emission transportation. We're located throughout the US. We've got a contingency in about each time zone except for Mountain Time. So like I said before, we're heavy on the education and outreach as well as fleet transition planning, smart deployment. So really thoughtful deployment of these vehicles. And then we've also been in the prototype development and demonstration phase. So a lot of these first generation vehicles, we helped build them. Not in our offices, but advise the build for transit need and other use cases. So just to kind of reiterate what Tone mentioned before, it is, I have in here not a mandate. It is, so there is a purchasing mandate, but not the transition mandate. And that's important for one reason is they're really saying that your purchase batches have to comply with this 25% rule. And so to move towards a transition, but they are not going to come down on you if you're not 100% by 2040. That part is the goal. The rule is the purchasing part. So we have that laid out. It does escalate pretty quickly there between 28 and 29. But you guys are a small transit agency, so other folks had to submit last year, wherein you guys have a little bit longer to get this knocked out and ratified. And so July 1st is when, in 2023, is when your rollout plan is done. And the thing we have in bold here is the big part is that if there is not a vehicle in the space that can meet the duty cycle required, there is an allowable space to request exemption from CARB. There's no guarantee that exemption is allowed, but you can request it. And then this kind of applies to cutaway vehicles as well as over the road commuters, like higher sitting commuter vehicles that are not Altoona tested, which is a bus testing requirement at the national level. So just a reminder, I know you guys are probably being like, I've seen this before, but just a reminder that there's 2 zero emission technologies. We are technology agnostic. We like to make sure that the shoe fits when you're making the transition. And there's pros and cons to each of them, and constraints and benefits to each of them. And so just kind of list out here, the battery electric bus runs solely on batteries. There's battery packs throughout the bottom of the vehicle. You just plug in and charge there. A fuel cell actually has hydrogen tanks on the top of the vehicle that takes hydrogen fuel, and the fuel cell actually splits the hydrogen, the 2 paired hydrogen molecule or atoms into a molecule, and then we get our electron release on that conversion that charges the battery and propels the vehicle forward. So those are the big technologies we focus on. And I don't want to bore you guys, so I'm flying through, but please feel free to stop me. Now, something to keep in mind, like I said, there are constraints and benefits to both technologies. And one of the biggest one is scaling infrastructure. So when you have a charger per bus, you tend to get in a bit of a investment and space concern. With battery electric buses. More equipment, you're buying more equipment, and you need more space to put that equipment. Wherein there's a pretty big payoff with a fuel cell vehicle when you build just one station that can have about a 48 foot by 28 footprint. And there's now even technology where you can, bury the tank and gain a little more land back. So we like to highlight this is that the cost to enter the fuel cell space is quite high with the price of hydrogen now, and we'll talk about that later. And the price of the vehicles are much higher at the moment. But really, as you scale up, it becomes more cost effective in your fleet size. And then with battery electric, entry is easier. There's a lot more experience here to borrow from, as well as just a longevity in the industry, in the market rather. And so we see, a payoff, a low cost to entry, easier to enter into this market, but you do end up getting into pretty high costing as you go on with your transition. So I'll get into the technology scenarios we consider, but first, in order to get through that and understand all these things, this is kind of our methodology. And I don't have a box for the ICT rollout, but ostensibly there's should be an arrow from this dropping down to the ICT rollout plan. So basically we've conducted all these assessments with Michael and Tone walking us through, ultimately to get a total cost of ownership for the next 20 years based on scenarios, technology solutions for your service. We get this really large master plan document that Tone mentioned that you guys will get to read. And then we also use that contains all of our methodology, all of our assumptions on pricing, our service assessment of the service you guys supply with real GPS data. And then we select some of the information from that to put in an ICT rollout plan. And the ICT rollout plan is CARB's kind of call and response to you all for this is what you need to tell us by July 1st in order to be compliant with this regulation. So that's what we're going to talk about next. Now, in order to understand a transition plan that meets the moment, the LAVTA moment, we do survey. I talked about this a little bit. I've got a font problem here, but we do an actual analysis of your routing to make sure that a battery electric bus that is charged, to understand overnight without on-route charging what it can do. And we see that it can make the achievable or feasible blocks are in blue. And you've got a bunch of gray space here. So we have to figure out what are we going to do to make sure that service is attainable and still supplied with the zero emission technology. So we considered a few scenarios here that make sure that you guys are meeting the mandate and also getting a zero emission transition all the way through. So one solution for covering that gray space on the slide that we had before is to have an on-route charger or a few on-route chargers for buses to charge while they're in service on a layover, about 15-minute layover, to get the juice they need to complete the route or the block. Another option is to, instead of having an on-route charger, meet all those gray service areas with a fuel cell electric bus, which has a longer range. And then the last option is if you don't want to look into having a mixed fleet for a number of reasons, you could transition completely to fuel cell only. And we assume that everything can be met on a fuel cell vehicle because the range is much higher for these vehicles. You don't have that range anxiety that you get with the battery electric bus. Excuse me. So all of that goes into that flow chart machine that I showed you earlier, and we get a total cost of ownership that's composed of anticipated maintenance costs for a 20-year period, as well as infrastructure costs for the fleet for that 20-year period, fuel, and the fleet. This light blue is just the capital cost of buying those vehicles. So we don't consider any retrofits or kind of reusing or retrofitting the vehicles to make them battery electric or electric. This is all new purchase. So that blue is quite large because it's a bunch of new vehicles. So we have all the scenarios down below. We have your baseline. That's as if you didn't have the mandate, business as usual, your fleet stayed exactly the same. We have depot with on-route charging. We have depot with fuel cell buses and fuel cell only scenario. So you'll notice that the costing here on the fourth one, the fuel cell only, is quite high. This is because the capital cost of the vehicle is a lot higher. It's about 1.2 million versus the 800,000 or so that we see on, or 850 we see for battery electric buses on the state contract. So this is really kind of what everything boils down to. But cost is not the only thing that matters when you're thinking about this. Operational payoff is a big deal for transitioning. And I think it's important to remember that we do have, in this last fuel cell scenario, we do have a station built at LAVTA, which is about a $5 million cost for a 50 bus station to serve your 68 vehicles. And so basically you can size it appropriately where you have a 50 bus station, but you just refill the hydrogen tank storage a little more frequently to fuel those extra 18 buses. So cost not everything. There's a few other things to consider. Pardon me. It's very dry in my office. But this is how the costing changes over time. And we did perform a sensitivity analysis on the hydrogen cost because we expect that fuel to come down. So we do perform a fuel assessment with a sensitivity analysis on future hydrogen costing, with the price being $5.50 for a kilogram. And then, so that's that low number here on the side. And then the higher cost is what we see OCTA paying for right now, which is $7.95 a kilogram. And that cost includes ownership and maintenance for the station, which if you did not have ownership of the station, you may not have all of those costs. I'm going to go on mute really quick and just drink some water. All right, excuse me. I guess that's a sign I've been talking too much today. So these are the things that are non-cost considerations, and I'll open it up for questions, but some things to think about. And I did do a little plus and minus here for this scenario. So while costs can be pretty prohibitive on the fuel cell side, there's some reasons why that levels up. But additionally, on the battery electric side, cost savings and being able to afford that, this is a huge benefit, and having a legacy behind that is really important. But a few more things to consider is that a BEV fleet does not operate the way that your current fleet does. You don't drive up to the station, fuel it, and move on. These vehicles have to be charged overnight for a much longer period. So that changes a little bit, kind of a lot of your operations. It can change service, it can require service changes or on-route charging requirement, longer layovers, additional drivers if you're increasing the fleet and switching out vehicles, which we haven't accounted for here since we have an on-route charger. But in addition, with that on-route charger, you don't consider the cost of acquisition for land to put that, because you don't want to be renting or borrowing land where you install this super expensive technology. And then it does require a major shift in infrastructure and operations that are quite different than what you're used to. Some of that can be mitigated with a mixed fleet. So instead of having to deal with that takes away the en route trouble really of that land acquisition and kind of routing things through to charge. But you do have two different fueling infrastructures, which can be difficult, and the creation of subfleets can be difficult operationally. Some folks manage it just fine, but it is another layer. A nice part of this scenario is that it's a little less expensive than number 3, and it does provide greater redundancy and resilience. So if the grid goes down, you still have hydrogen vehicles that you can power and supply service. Now, the fuel cell fleet is operationally very similar to the service you're already running. You don't have, like I said, a ton of range anxiety there, and you wouldn't have to kind of change your service to accommodate that, especially with labor and fueling at the end of the day or at night. We do really anticipate the price of hydrogen to go down. $7.95 is really exorbitant to change from diesel to that price. We definitely see that and understand it. But we do know of developments, green hydrogen production in the region that could really significantly change the market that are imminent, as well as with vehicle supply. And lastly, there's a lot of potential to leverage. Instead of spending that $5 million on a station up front, you may want to do it eventually when you're operating 68 fuel cell buses. But early on, you can leverage local stations, which we know are being built and developed in the region, in order to lower your capital infrastructure costs for LAVTA early on in the transition. So that's kind of an overview of where we landed. You all will be able to read all about it in the document that was shared to you. And of course, any questions you may have, we're happy to answer. So you'll have that copy, and then we'll look for guidance for developing your rollout plan. And I can pass it back to Tone or open for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Savannah. Let me see if any of our board members have any questions. Feel free to raise your hand like this or push the raise hand button. Gina.
Hi, thank you, Savannah. We haven't met. Thank you for that report. I think this is really cool stuff. So I'm really interested in the next couple of meetings we have where we learn more and get a chance to dig into that report. A question about the hydrogen. One of the things I did look through the report some, didn't get through the whole 150 pages, but did find a few things that I had questions about at this point. Won't try to get into the weeds too much, but there is this requirement to, at some point, and it wasn't clear to me what point, that the hydrogen, most of our hydrogen right now comes from fossil fuels. So the CARB, I guess, has mandated 33% of the hydrogen has to come from renewables. And my question is, what are your thoughts on how doable that is? And is that in 2040? Is that, how is that going to be implemented in the plan? And is that factored into your hydrogen costs, which you're counting on coming down to make it viable? So that's my first question. I do have a couple. So that's my first one. I don't know if you want to take that first.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that one first. That's an absolutely excellent question. So, so that bill that you mentioned, the 33% renewable requirement, is SB 1505, and it is active now. It's required. AC Transit and OCTA have to buy their fuel according to this, as does Golden Empire. Anyone who's buying hydrogen fuel has to do this. And you're absolutely correct that current market available hydrogen is created through steam methane reforming, which is considered brown hydrogen or dirty hydrogen. And it has kind of a higher carbon intensity. And so how they manage that now is that the fuel suppliers and creators actually buy carbon credits to offset. So it's just kind of a payment process at the moment. But currently, CT is working with a few other groups to develop very, very low CI hydrogen production from waste paper and waste biomass, which is really appealing. And those are being built out in Northern California, about 2 hours east of LAVTA, and then in Southern California. So those will be online. I don't actually have the dates in front of me, but those will be online and radically change the market because the low carbon fuel standards credits also reduce the cost for the makers of those. They get a lot of payoff for creating hydrogen that way. And then additionally in Livermore, First Element has a distribution and storage site, which is dairy gas reformed hydrogen, which is very low carbon intense and very green hydrogen as well. So that would actually just be down the street from you guys.
Okay, I didn't realize that First Element was, so there's all these colors for the different kinds of hydrogen, which is not completely, I don't have it completely in my mind, but so that's not totally gray.
Yeah, and they're moving away from that, so don't worry about it.
Okay, good, because it's not very clear system, so I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so you're feeling fairly confident in ability on that one, which is good to hear. In scenario 2, just again, I'm just trying to get a few overview questions before we really do more of this in subsequent meetings. In scenario 2, is there going to be an optimum balance? I mean, it's not just necessarily 50-50 electric battery versus fuel cell. So there's going to be some optimization using your model that'll say we need 33% fuel cells to take care of the longer routes or whatever it is. So that'll be an optimized distribution.
Yeah, and that's right. So it's not arbitrary. It's split down the line of what's capable. So I think we draw the line right about at the 71 because we want to make sure that, you know, you're not spending extra money that you don't need to because a BEV can do it. So we cut it where your service is accessible on an overnight depot charge. And Nikki may have the percentage at her fingertips. Sometimes she does, but it's somewhere, you know, upwards of 50% is available, is transition to battery electric, and then the fuel cells are really just meeting this gray component of your service.
Okay, so they pick up the unachievable ones with the batteries. Okay, 2 more quick questions. In the 2040 cumulative chart, cost chart you showed, I mean, do we consider sort of what happens to those lines after 2040, how they might turn over, how some things may cross others and become more, you know, as hydrogen becomes potentially a more economical technology, that one might turn over? Or is that just not the horizon we're going to be considering?
That's correct. So we do not go beyond 2040 because anyway, the 20-year period, we know that this market is changing radically there. And so to extend it, you know, it can sometimes be not a stab in the dark, but it does get a little more, it's less solid.
Sure.
We always could extend, but I think the most important thing that you can't quite see in this graphic is the sensitivity analysis, which is where we perform this like concept of the future cost of hydrogen, you know, what it is now and what we think it will be in 2040. And you guys may be familiar with the Earthshot initiative from the Biden administration, which is to hope for $1 hydrogen, which is would be lovely. So we do kind of perform some of that, but and then we also make assumptions that, and you'll be able to read this in the master plan, that, you know, battery technology improves, and so that what we see today is not what we'll see in 2040, and we try to capture that as much as possible.
Right. I think your assumptions look reasonable in my first glance on them. So last question is, I'm just trying to understand what our job is over the next couple of meetings, both as a member of the P&S committee and a board member. Is staff going, I mean, I cut to the bottom line of your report, and CTE doesn't make a recommendation per se. They just tell us what to be careful of and what to think about, how to think about it. And maybe this is back to Mike and Tone, are you going to make a recommendation to us at the November board meeting or at the PSS meeting? Are you going to sort of tell us what you think the recommended scenario is, or are we going to? I'm just curious about how this works. Generally, at the city council meetings, staff will make a recommendation and we'll talk about it. Is that the way this is going to go in November?
Michael, would you like me to take that?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is it's your P&S committee meeting. We'll talk about a recommendation. We'll bring forward a recommendation, and then if you concur or have an alternative recommendation, that'll go along to where in the November board meeting we have recommendations.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for those questions or those answers. I appreciate it. That's all.
Good questions. Kathy? Darren?
Thank you. Savannah, I will be the first to admit that I have not read the 150-page reporter, so I thought I would take the extra time. So I may be jumping ahead, but I'm curious, as you consider the electric costs and things, if we look at creating solar farms, battery storage, to bring those costs down and to be green, so to speak, how that all figures in?
Yeah, so sorry, I may need some clarification on the question. So are you more asking how to answer to the renewable requirement, or sorry, maybe you could restate a little bit.
Well, so I'm just curious, you've got a cost of electricity, cost of the fuel, right? And so if you invest and you put the solar panels and the battery storage in, that electricity then becomes free in a sense. So I'm just wondering if that sort of thing factored in, or are you just assuming we're paying PG&E or somebody for that in your cost charts here?
Thanks for clarifying. So we do not assume that you are making the capital expenditure for a solar array. That's a bit beyond, unless you tell us that's what you're doing. So we do assume that the TOU BEV 5 rate schedule, which is made for commercial operators by PG&E for electricity as fuel. We have performed a sensitivity analysis. I think everyone is aware that PG&E is planning to do about 10 million or maybe billion dollars worth of upgrades to prevent wildfires and kind of retroactively fix that infrastructure. We have conducted a sensitivity analysis on what, if that gets passed on to the end user, what that looks like in the price of electricity in 20 years. And it's much higher. So we are aware of that and we're familiar with that. We never assume, I think that it might be a bit of a myth that solar can be free or has a pretty big payoff. So we typically get another contractor to deal with that and the PPAs and all of that trouble that can come with trouble and benefit that can come with those things. So that's not specifically considered, but we have run sensitivity on the cost of electricity as fuel.
Okay.
Steve might want to add an answer.
Yeah, that's why I raised my hand. This is Steve Claremont, working with Savannah and Nikki on this. One of the other challenges we see with solar is that the property that you're at right now, you wouldn't be able to put enough solar panels on that property in order to charge a fleet of buses. So we do see a lot of agencies putting up solar canopies, and they do provide, and generally that energy is put back on the grid. So it's kind of a net metering situation instead. And you can claim some credit for that, but it definitely will never be enough energy that you would need to be able to charge those buses. And the battery energy storage, we kind of look at that again as more of a resiliency step in order to have some energy available to you, either for peak shaving, offsetting the high cost of electricity during peak times, or when you may lose power. And again, you'll never be able to have enough reasonably cost battery energy storage, at least in the near term, to store a significant amount of energy. These systems are very expensive. Instead, what we envision though is that the grid itself, the generation of power itself, will become greener over time. So we imagine that there'll be industrial scale solar generation by either independent companies or by the utilities themselves that will feed into the grid. And we think that's longer term going to end up being a better solution for renewable electricity.
Steve, this is the chair. I want to chat. When you say the we don't have enough space. Are you referring to the Aquarius bus wash step? I mean, where we have a large piece of land over there that's still not adequate?
No, and I'm probably not familiar with that particular piece of land, if that would be adequate. And I don't know if has a study been done of how much energy that property might be able to generate by any chance?
I'm not familiar with any study like that, Michael.
You're talking about Atlantis?
Atlantis, I said Aquarius, Atlantis. Yeah, the Atlantis site. I don't know how many acres it is, but it's a very large, it's nothing compared to our little office that we have over here.
Yeah, you know, we are looking at solar at that facility, but boy, Tamara, help me. I think it's under 10 acres. It's probably like 6 point something acres. So I don't think it would generate, what'd you say, Tamara?
It's 8 acres, but we lost an acre to the bioswales.
Got it. I guess the short answer is that we're looking at solar on site there, but really view probably the potential of powering the buildings themselves there with the solar, probably not a lot of excess to put into hydrogen.
I was thinking definitely the parking lot. Parking lots are so nice. All right. Okay.
Carla, you've got Director Josie with her.
Yeah, I was just going to, you're split second ahead of me. Director Josie, do you have a question?
I did, but I wanted to make sure Director Narum was done with her questions.
Actually, I wasn't.
Oh, okay. You know why? Because they rotate your position when you take your hand down.
Yeah,
So thank you, Jean.
kind of
finish.
seconded into my question. So I'm still back a little bit on the solar, excuse me, and you know, our power is going to be coming from EBCE, which is basically out procuring solar and wind for the most part on the green. And so I'm just wondering if, you know, this isn't something that could be taken into consideration somewhat long term, but, you know, there's land around the airport and so forth in the airport protection area that, you know, could make sense to benefit the region with solar and so forth. So it's just something that I think if we really, you know, need to kind of think outside the box as we move this way. And then my other question, Savannah made a comment about retrofitting the buses and that wasn't taken into consideration. And I was wondering if is that a cost issue or reliability issue? And if she could just touch on why that wasn't considered.
Yeah, a great question. So we generally, we don't really have an official stance on this, but and we do some prototype retrofits as an entity, but for a large transition with full, you know, purchase recycling, you know, ending 12, hold on. So we cycle out a 12-year lifespan. We assume that you're never retiring a vehicle early, so that by the time you're ready to get ZEBs, you are buying new ones. So that's one thing. We don't want to retire anything early. That helps do the purchasing cycles much easier. You know, you're using the vehicles you have until it's time for them to not be used anymore, and then you're just buying a new one, and that saves a lot on costing to go back and upgrade an older vehicle. You also, those vehicles lose some efficiency just not being built to be zero emission. And so we just don't consider that. It's a little too complex considering all the moving parts of a transition plan. So we assume new purchase, but based on your real purchase cycles so that you're not spending money for no reason when it's time to buy a new one.
So just to clarify that, meaning that under all these mandates and everything, we would be able to take a bus and put the typical number of miles on it as a diesel or a diesel fuel, and then retire it and replace it new with the zero emission, whatever that might be.
That's right. Yeah.
That makes total sense then.
And they have the same lifespan, federal lifespan as well. So yep, good question.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Director Josie.
Thank you. Mike, I really only have one question, and it's about the cost difference between the all battery electric and the combined battery electric and fuel cell buses. And it's such a minor difference in cost, but we're talking about approximately a third of the buses, I think, being fuel cell in that second scenario there. And my question is the reason there's such a minor difference in cost there because the first buses we would acquire would be the battery electric, and we would be waiting a little bit on the fuel cell buses and waiting for some of those costs to come down a little bit and deferring the cost of building our own refueling station. Is that the reason those costs are so similar?
Okay, sorry, unmuting. I have to look at kind of the pieces. I'm sure that there's a few reasons in here because this is so many costs stacked together. I'm sure that's one of the reasons, but we actually don't assume a capital cost decrease of the vehicle's purchase price just because we're not comfortable saying fuel cell buses will cost this much in 10 years and batteries will cost this much. We use today's prices. So that's not a reason that it's coming down. One of them is the infrastructure cost savings with not scaling out an entire battery electric bus yard and having kind of that mixed fleet. And then I think the biggest one is there on the infrastructure. You can see that 20 million versus 14. So that's where there's some savings there. The capital cost is a bit better than the third scenario because a fuel cell, all fuel cells 1.2 million, and we're considering 850, I think, for the BEVs. So that one's a little lower. And then there's a few savings on the fuel, and that's really because for this total cost of ownership, we use that 795, which is such a high fuel price, and we do not have the sensitivity that comes down in that little red block. So it's a few things, and the master plan should lay them out a little bit, but a couple of things drive that down a little more than the fuel cell, and then make it a little comparable to number one. That cover your question?
It does. The one piece was, would we in that scenario, would we be primarily buying the battery electrics first and the fuel cells a little later?
Yes, I knew I forgot something. Yes. Yeah, so we have, and I do have some hidden slides here that have your fleet composition over time.
And I did see it in the report. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding what I was reading as I glanced.
Yeah, that's right. So it looks like your first fuel cell purchase is 29 and you're buying BEVs first. So that is a delayed purchase. But the price is still 1.2 million.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, thank you. Great questions. I have just had a couple that I didn't hear, and if I did, I apologize. When you charted the achievable number of blocks and a distance, our distance before that unachievable with the battery electric was in the range of 175 miles and 71 blocks. Tone or Michael, how far do our buses go on a regular day? Are school trippers, are they double dipping? So they're doing regular routes, 10 hours, etc., and then switching over to school trippers. What's the route or expectation in a day?
It varies. I think it shows, if you look at this chart, that it could fluctuate between 25 to 300 miles, depending on the block the vehicle is being assigned to.
25 to 300.
Yes.
So is that something that we can balance out so that 25 is closer to 150 so that we can be under the gray area of unachievable? Maybe that's going to be real complex, but.
We can definitely look into that. But I think the challenge is trying to interline some of the shorter trip with the longer trip and avoiding having long splits. So I think we've done a good job of trying to package whatever we could, but this is pretty much the end result. But we can definitely relook at it.
Well, yeah, I just want to make sure that if we're buying battery electric buses that they're interchangeable for all the routes. So that would be important to me. And then my second question is to Michael Tree or Tone. I know we've been talking with Gillig for a while about a fuel cell bus. Is there anything you can update us on? How's that coming along? Are we waiting for federal funding, or what's the story with that? Are they definitely on board? Any information?
I can give you my latest discussions with Gillig, and they have a vision for the hydrogen buses. They're ramping up their engineering department and others to develop the hydrogen bus, and I think they're targeting delivery of hydrogen buses in 2025. So if we ordered them, and we have quite a few order dates for buses in the next 10 years. And so that 2025 date probably doesn't fit your very next bus purchase, and maybe not even the second, but from there on, we should have an opportunity to buy hydrogen from Gillig.
Maybe we don't want the very first one. I don't know. Like anything, I would say that for any vehicle. Last question, Savannah. You talked about en route charging, but you also said to fully charge, it's an overnight process. When you talk about an en route charge, is that like a 1 hour charge just to get you a little bit more distance so that the bus driver takes lunch? Or, I mean, I have a bus that's not in use during that charging period. So I just wonder if you could comment on the time expectation to do that mid-route charge.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of mid-route or on-route charging behaviors one can adopt. And really in this case, what we assume is really the on-route charger is a super high-powered charger. So it's not the same as the one that's charging over 8 hours overnight. It's really topping the battery off for 15 minutes during a layover. So one thing that does is that removes the layovers as being able to use as catch-up, which can be hard operationally because we assume 1 minute for alignment or plugging in or alignment on a wireless or a pantograph up charger, and then 14 minutes of charging to just kind of juice up the battery a little more and go on with the route. So it's not a really long full charge. It's just enough to get going and finish the job.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, sometimes phones can do that. You can do a quick charge. And I know, I guess that actually I will ask in my last question, because I know phones are high tech, but small scale. Is it expected that batteries over the life of a bus that's used every day and significantly, unlike maybe a vehicle, that battery life will lessen through time? So it's really good when you first get it, and 5 years later, the ability to hold the charge is not as strong.
Yeah, absolutely. We use the phone metaphor a lot to talk about the batteries. So we do, you'll notice in the maintenance section, actually in the capital cost of the vehicle, we add about a $50,000 cost of warranty to protect the batteries, because we assume an 80% degradation on that battery at its midlife, which is, if the vehicle is 12 years, then midlife is 6. So yeah, battery electric buses do portend a full replacement to make sure that you've got a functional vehicle at about 6 years. So that's a cost that we do fold in to the maintenance and to the capital costs. Similarly, fuel cell, also we portend that it will have to be overhauled again, just because it's so much power moving through them that they do derate.
Are they using precious metals? Like we hear about precious metals in your phones, that they're limited amount and that they'll be more difficult to obtain through the years as these metals that are only found in small parts of the world.
Yeah, the batteries and the fuel cells both use rare earth metals, platinum, cobalt. So that is a really something that the industry has to tackle, is what happens to the batteries. Can they be used as external storage, to power the lights in the parking lot after they're done being a bus battery or something like that? So it's definitely something that the industry is confronting. What happens to these? Can we reuse them? And how can we mitigate the environmental impact of this environmental solution. So something to look at.
We don't want them to be like catalytic converters where people are stealing them from the buses. Thank you for your presentation. Do we have, that was really our questions period. Jennifer, do we have any public comment on zero bus emissions?
I do not see any.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any last comments? As stated, this will go to the Projects and Services Committee and then hopefully come back to the board. Okay, well, we'll just keep moving forward then. Thank you. Agenda item 7, which is an alternate appointment for LAVTA's board member on the Paratransit Demonstration Project Committee, which we had our first meeting today.
Yes, so the staff report's pretty brief on this. The board requested that that the board have an alternate to serve on that ad hoc committee for when Chair Carla Brown or board member David Hobart were unable to attend. I will say that it's a 12-month pilot project. And so the board or the ad hoc committee today chose to meet again in November as its next date. And it's likely that unless we extend the pilot project, that a recommendation would be made coming out of that November meeting for the board. So a pretty short-lived ad hoc committee unless we extend things.
I did talk to our board member, Melissa Hernandez. She showed an interest, and I like the idea of at least 2 districts, so it's not 2 from the same town, and also Dublin is closest to the C3 CTA district. Melissa, are you still interested?
Yes, of course. I'm fine with being on the board if either you or supervisor are not able to attend. But I have a feeling you're going to be there at every single meeting, Carla.
I try very hard. But you're right, David is probably busier than I am, and I got a busy schedule.
I promise to miss 1 meeting in the next year at least.
There you go. We'll keep you busy, keep you current. All right, so that I'm going to make a nomination for Melissa. Do I have a second, or is anybody discussion?
Happy to second that.
All right, that was Jean for the second. All right, any discussion? Any public comment?
I don't see any public comments.
Okay, all right, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Director Bonanno,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hobart,
Aye.
Director Hernandez,
Aye.
Director Josie,
Aye.
and I see Director Kick is on here. Director Kick,
Yay.
Yes, sorry, I was doctor's appointment with Max, but back. Yes.
Director Narum,
Yes.
Chair Brown,
Yes.
passes.
All right, glad to have you joining. I hope all the little guy Max is doing well after his doctor's appointment. No broken arms or anything serious. Matters executive director's report, Michael.
All right. Well, I promised to be short on this, although I do want to talk about something that's not on the executive director's report that has been surfacing as a concern with staff, but did want to mention that there's a lot of good information in the executive director's report. The Project and Services Committee talked about these things at length, and I think of recent importance, the ACTC Commission and their PPC committee. And Jennifer Yeomans helped me with PPC if need be on what that stands for. But they today forwarded to MTC a recommendation for about $2.7 million in RM2 to go along with our SAB project, although we'll have to formally ask for an allocation in the future on that. But in addition to just that agenda item of kind of tagging that money for the SAB project, that committee also approved an allocation request of $150,000 for continued upgrade of intersections in regard to that project, and also the design work for a SAB stop. And so that continues to roll forward. With that said, knowing that you've likely read what's in the executive director's report, I did want to talk just a little bit about a driver shortage that we're having, and really it's industry wide, and it's in the Bay Area for sure, and it's really hitting home here at LAVTA. So I wanted to talk about that for a brief moment with the board, and also we have an upcoming bus purchase of all things, and these would be the hybrid buses. And we have a unique situation where some of the equipment that we have had a lot of success with as far as maintaining and life cycle costs is available for a short window. And so before I say too much more about that, Jennifer Yeamans is handling that procurement of the buses, and it entails potentially an additional board meeting. But Jennifer, anything, any details that we could give the board just to kind of give them a preview of why a special board meeting may be needed?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I think this, I've only been at LAVTA for 5 years now, and I think it's probably a little unusual to call a special board meeting for anything, but to procure 16 buses is not nothing. So I wanted to give you a little heads up. Yeah, I'm glad you've got buses on your mind already. That will make this easier. But we're not talking about procuring zero emission buses. Current board policy is that we procure diesel electric hybrid buses. Back in March, the board approved our 5-year capital improvement program, which outlined a purchase schedule of 16 buses this year, followed by another 12 in 2023. And that's to replace buses now reaching the end of their useful life, just to keep our fleet in an overall state of good repair. So as Michael alluded to, once we got the funding lined up from MTC, you know, the feds put in 80% of the money. When we buy these buses, we put in the other 20%. So obviously getting the federal funding lined up is job one. We've worked on that. We've talked amongst staff on the specifications we desire, and the, you know, between the different vendors and suppliers out there in the industry, we're kind of hitting a transition window in terms of hybrid propulsion systems out there, where there's a product we want to acquire that is reaching the end of its life cycle. The next product the supplier will have to offer the vendor is still only in testing mode. As Carla said, as Chair Brown said, you know, you don't necessarily want the first one off the line. So the desire is to acquire the last of what we know works while it's still available. Because as Michael alluded to, that is the desire of the staff who are responsible for maintaining our fleet. So for Gillig to be able to work with their suppliers to provide us this equipment, they need a commitment from this agency. Possibly the October 4th board meeting will work, but if it doesn't, and they need a commitment before the end of this month, September, we would need to convene a special board meeting. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about sort of why we might act on things quickly in the agency. You know, the idea being it would be in the agency's best interest to do so, obviously, and it would be in accordance with all of our other procurement policies and requirements. But you know, certainly Jennifer Suda would be reaching out to all of you to schedule that. But at the moment, if a special meeting is required, we'd probably be looking at September 27th, which is the day of the Projects and Services Committee meeting, when we know at least a certain number of you are available, and it would probably be just a single item on the agenda.
Thoughts on that? I know I'd certainly, yes, Jean?
Yeah, I have no issue with that. My quick question is just, are we talking about a commitment for this year's purchase or this year's and the next one as well, to make sure that Gillig can provide those hybrid buses?
That is a very good question. It is a commitment for this year's purchase only. The thinking would be for the follow-on purchase 2 years from now, that the successor product would be available and be, you know, road tested.
Good, great. I know I'm certainly going to go to projects and services meetings anyway, but definitely available for a follow-on meeting. And I'll throw this out. We have quite a few new board members, and I remember I did a tour when Gillig was brand new. And got to see the facility. But if this organization is buying 16 buses, I wonder if any of our new members would like to request a tour of Gillig and see our own buses at least final assembly here in Livermore. Is that right? I mean, there should be manufactured in Livermore, right?
Yes, 100%. Yep.
Good. I mean, that's something to be very proud of. Usually we label the buses, built in the United States or built locally, and built in Livermore would be a very cool sign to be on the side of the bus in the window. That's about as local as you can get with LAVTA just down the street. Does that sound interesting, or am I the only one that would be interested in a tour?
I've actually toured Gillig twice in
Oh.
various capacities, but I would absolutely go again. It's a really cool tour, so I would recommend it and would love to do it again, especially in the context of a big procurement like this. So count me in.
All right, so we'll just circle back then. If anybody's interested, we'll have Jennifer when it gets closer to a ship time or acquisition time. So do we need a roll call vote for availability, or can we just have Jennifer circle back? Because if you need a special meeting and the day of the projects and services meeting doesn't work, maybe we can slip it just the next day or something, and we'll try to catch up to the finance department.
You don't need a vote. She can poll you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it then. Great, thank you, Jennifer. That's exciting. So exciting.
All right, so the issue, most of the time, the information you have in the executive director's reports just really great information, and that just stems from your staff working hard and having really good technical capacity on your staff. But the difficult discussion is certainly the number of operators that we need to operate the system, the number of drivers. We're currently about 20 drivers down from where we need to be able to operate pre-COVID levels with the wheels system. And that's pretty comparable to where County Connection is at and other transit agencies in the Bay Area. Nationwide, there was a recent small operators GM conference call, and there were a lot of things on the agenda, and we never got off the first agenda item of operator shortage. It's just it's a difficult thing to manage. So we, some weeks back, had put on to the street 15-minute service. We put that back into the rapid routes during peak time with the thought that we might be in a position and the public might be in a position to come back, the choice riders, onto the rapid route. With the COVID variant, that hasn't materialized, and we haven't seen the ridership increases on the rapid routes. And so what's happening is we're not able to hire currently as fast as we thought. And in fact, we're losing drivers at a rate that correspondingly we didn't think we would lose them at. We've got folks going out for various reasons, including other agencies and companies that are just plain trying to hire our employees, such as Google and UPS and FedEx. There's just a real shortage in general of drivers on the market. So as of late, over the last 2 operating days, we're finding it hard to meet our schedule in the morning. We're actually not meeting a couple of pulls, which are runs in the morning. So being that the ridership didn't come back onto the rapid routes during that 15-minute, the peak window, staff's proposing as a temporary solution to take the rapid routes back to 30-minute all-day service and not have that 15-minute headway or frequency in the peak. And that'll actually loosen up 8 drivers to cover other routes where we're just having a trouble overall. And again, we've really taken a big focus on this at the staff level, basically starting to talk about it day and night. Tony, for example, in the marketing department has a postcard going out to several cities with information about the opportunities to drive for wheels and the benefits. We've been doing targeted social media. We've been having open houses on a weekly basis. So we're doing a lot of things. It's been on the radio, but I just wanted to alert you that for the first time, at least since I've been here, we're having a tough time meeting all of the runs in the morning. For example, like a 7 to an 8 run on a particular route. We're we're working on the website in the future and on our Facebook to make sure customers know about that, and there's not a unreliability sentiment that creeps into the system. But anyway, I wanted to make sure you knew we were struggling a bit, and we're working hard. We're beginning to have a lot of focus on this issue, even more so since the number of people that we hoped to have hired even just a month ago isn't materializing.
Yeah, thank you for that update. I've seen the buses with $3,000 binders, an initiation fee, something like that. Board member Kick, do you have a question, comment?
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there anything special? I know probably you need a different license, but is there some sort of age requirement or something that I might not know about? And have we been talking to high schools at all about helping recent graduates in the last couple of years who are having trouble finding any jobs get those special licenses and spread that word? Just any information that I don't. What do you need to be a bus driver? I don't know the rules.
That's a great question. Tone, you want to address that one? I know you've been working on getting folks on board.
Sure, we do provide training. So as long as you have just a regular driver license, we can train you to obtain the commercial driver license. I believe the minimum requirement, I think, is at least 3 years of driving experience. So I'm not sure high school kids, unless they're a senior in high school or have at least 3-year driving experience, will qualify. But college student definitely, and we have targeted that group with no success. But we can send you more information if you're interested in terms of the minimum qualification.
I'm thinking college students and veterans as well. Yeah. Good question. Okay, well, thank you for your report. It looks like you're headed to get the award for Agency of the Year, ching, that we didn't get last year because of COVID. And where is that at? And if you could offer just information that board members could attend.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the staff report, it talks a little bit about where that's at. It's currently planned to be in Orlando at the Orange County Convention Center from November 7th through the 10th. And the board, in approving their budget, did set aside funding for a couple of board members to go back and enjoy that conference. There's an expo, which doesn't happen every year, and the expo highlights all of the different buses and products that are available in public transit. So there's a real educational piece to this, as well as some sessions. So if you're interested, we can get more information from you if need be. There's a link to the website there about the conference, and we can certainly make some travel arrangements and hotel arrangements for you. Tony, you've got the latest on this, but there are conferences being canceled all across the country with this COVID variant. And is there any latest information on the LAVTA event?
The latest I can tell you is that LAVTA had planned to have a rather large conference. It was going to be the marketing conference, the legal conference, the administrative professionals conference, and transit tech conference were all going to be combined in Philadelphia in the first week in October. And LAVTA just either last week or the week before canceled those because of COVID concerns. And I don't know. Florida's track record at the present time regarding COVID cases is a little worse than Pennsylvania's. So I don't have a crystal ball here, but there's a chance that may not happen. Although a lot of vendors have put a lot of money into holding an expo, so.
That'd be a disappointment, that's for sure. All right, well, tell them to keep the trophy until we can get there, that's for sure.
Oh, we've already got the trophy. We need to bring it back and have them give it to us in front of 10,000 people.
Here, give it back to me.
Yeah.
It might be in front of 10 people. All right, Thank you so much for the executive director's report. You talked about a change in the rapid. Michael, do you want to bring that back to projects and services, or that decision's been made?
Yeah, based on it being a temporary, very near future need, our staff is shooting for next Monday, the 20th, to make that change. So we'll probably start marketing that and putting that out to drivers like tomorrow or Wednesday. We just feel like it's better to publicize and be successful with a more limited schedule than to be missing runs and catching people by surprise who are trying to get to school, well, to work and medical appointments and so on.
Right, absolutely. And then there will be notifications in other locations because the riders need to know as well. The rapid is a 30-minute ride instead of 15 minutes.
Yep.
Let everybody know, please. That'd be great. Right. Matters initiated by board members. Anything that any board members want to initiate? All right, seeing none, I guess that means you're doing a great job. Our next meeting, unless we have a special meeting, our next board meeting is scheduled for October 4th. This meeting is adjourned.